Yeah, not a big surprise because as America embarks on its America First foreign policy, a lot of non-Americans are feeling, well, kind of unwelcome. Canada are just saying we don't want any part of the United States as, well, President Trump tries to make the case for making their entire country the 51st state.
2025 was meant to be the summer of revival for the United States. Travel analysts projected a global return to the American experience, the coastlines, the cities, the national parks. But instead of a booming comeback, the season has unraveled into a sobering retreat. In cities once bustling with international visitors, sidewalks now stretch quiet and empty. Beaches that should be overflowing sit eerily calm. Flights are arriving with fewer foreign passengers. And in Canada, what started as frustration has turned into a quiet boycott. Millions of Canadians are choosing to stay home or vacation elsewhere. The shift is not just cultural, it is economic, and its impact is deep. Across more than 50 countries, travel advisories now warn citizens about visiting the United States. The reasons vary, from safety concerns to visa complications, but the message is consistent. America no longer feels like a welcoming destination. Canada has become the most visible example of this change. The tone between Washington and Ottawa has deteriorated sharply. Heated trade disputes, political remarks about sovereignty, and sweeping tariffs have pushed Canadian travelers to reconsider their southern trips. This cooling of relations is no longer symbolic. It is showing up in data, bookings, and receipts. In Los Angeles, international visitors spent $34 billion in 2022. That spending supported nearly 500,000 jobs across the hospitality, transportation, and service sectors. Among those international visitors, Canadians consistently ranked near the top. They contributed more than $400 million a year to the local economy. That spending is now vanishing. With fewer foreign travelers arriving, LA is facing a $1 billion budget shortfall. Nationally, tourism projections have flipped. A year that was supposed to bring a 9% increase in foreign arrivals is now expected to see a decline of more than 5%. That means an $18 billion drop in tourism spending across the country. These aren't forecasts. These are losses already in motion. All across the U.S., workers are feeling the effects. Hotel clerks in Arizona report empty rooms. Restaurant owners in Florida see sales down by double digits. Tour guides in Boston are canceling trips as overseas groups quietly pull out. Even in major cities like New York and Chicago, where international tourism once felt untouchable, foot traffic is thinning. Businesses that rely on seasonal demand are scaling back hours, cutting shifts, or closing entirely. Rising costs from tariffs and supply disruptions only worsen the outlook. For those in the tourism sector, this is not a short-term slump. It is the beginning of a deeper rupture. Other nations are responding with intention. European governments are updating guidance on travel. To the U.S., airlines are reducing flight capacity into American hubs. Tourism agencies in Mexico and Southeast Asia are repositioning themselves to capture travelers who are no longer considering the U.S. destinations once considered secondary. Dubai, Lisbon, Seoul are now gaining ground on traditional U.S. favorites. Families that once booked Disneyland are shifting to international options with fewer complications and friendlier impressions. America is not just losing revenue, it is losing relevance in the global tourism map. At the highest levels of government, tourism has been largely absent from the conversation. While trade deals are signed and tariffs announced, the service economy, and the millions who depend on it, are left waiting. This absence of leadership has consequences. Tourism is more than leisure. It is a driver of jobs, city budgets, and international goodwill. In 2025, the U.S. is on track to lose over $18 billion in tourism revenue. Behind that figure are workers, families, and businesses with no backup plan. The world is watching, and many are quietly choosing to go elsewhere.
The only thing that can't be created here is an end to the tariffs.
It's affected me pretty severely. The main thing being the complete drop-off of our American sales momentum.
It's our plan to say, let's produce as much as we can in Canada.
In 2025, Donald Trump launched a new round of tariffs. Cars not made in the U.S., 25%, aluminum, steel, lumber, more tariffs. His message was simple: bring factories home, punish foreign suppliers, rebuild American industry. But just months into this effort, the consequences are taking shape, and they're not what the White House promised. Canadian firms are pulling back, U.S. businesses are scrambling, and everyday Americans are paying more for cars, groceries, even homes.
Ron Marcolin says many businesses in the region have focused on growing trade with Europe and India. A recent survey conducted by the group shows the tariffs continue to negatively impact businesses across Canada.
Across Canada, the message was clear. The U.S. was no longer a stable trade partner. In New Brunswick, glassmaker Curtis Dion saw his U.S. sales vanish. In 2024, buyers from the U.S. made up 10% of his business. In 2025, that number dropped to 0. Schneider Electric, a global energy firm, made its own move. It expanded production at its plant in Brossard, Quebec, boosting capacity by 30% and hiring 17 new workers. The goal wasn't growth for its own sake. It was a pivot away from dependency. The company said it planned to produce as much as we can in Canada, regardless of what happened across the border. And the data supported this shift. According to Statistics Canada, in May 2025, exports to the U.S. declined, while exports to other countries surged nearly 6%, a record. That shift wasn't symbolic. It was structural. Canada also holds strategic leverage. Ontario briefly floated a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S. Chlorine, aluminum, and softwood lumber, key ingredients for U.S. infrastructure and consumer goods, largely come from Canadian sources. And if tariffs push them out, the alternatives will be slower, pricier, and less secure.
One thing's for sure, cars are about to get more expensive in the U.S.
Aluminum's a whole different world. There's a reason why it was outsourced to begin with.
We have to ask ourselves, what are the reasons why we don't produce enough in this country?
Inside the U.S., many companies are caught off guard. Big brands like Walmart stocked up early. Their imports from China jumped 33% in 2024. But small firms didn't have that luxury. Deer Stags, a footwear company, imports 98% of its shoes from China. With no room to stockpile, they now face tariffs over 16%, pulled directly from their bank account by U.S. Customs. At ITS Logistics in Fort Worth, Texas, companies rushed to store goods before tariffs kicked in. But that came at a cost. Warehousing, shipping, compliance. It all adds up, and all of it gets passed to the customer. For businesses without deep pockets, this isn't protection, it's punishment. That brings us to the people who have no choice but to absorb it all: American consumers. In March 2025, the aluminum tariff was raised to 25%. By May, the U.S. Midwest aluminum premium had jumped more than 60%, according to S&P Global. Coca-Cola warned it may shift more packaging to plastic to avoid the impact. In the auto sector, the fallout was sharper. The average transaction price for new cars in the U.S. neared $50,000 in February 2025. With tariffs, analysts from Cox Automotive projected price hikes between 15% and 20% for cars built outside the U.S. or made with foreign parts. That's roughly $6,000 added per vehicle. The construction industry was hit too. CoreLogic estimated that tariffs on steel, aluminum, and Canadian lumber could raise the price of a newly built home by $22,000 over the next 12 months. That's on top of a market where over 100 million American households already can't afford the median home price. Trump promised a revival: factories, jobs, American steel. But reality moves slower. New aluminum smelters take up to 10 years. Sawmills can't ramp up overnight. Labor shortages and environmental limits stand in the way. Meanwhile, Canada is already moving forward, cutting exposure to U.S. risk and finding new markets. And back in the U.S., it's not China or Mexico footing the bill. It's the small manufacturers, the independent builders, the families trying to buy their first home. Trump called it a trade strategy, but to many Americans, it's starting to look like a bill they can't afford.
I think it was a clever tactic by Prime Minister Carney to hold on to this tax to the last minute, and then President Trump came in at the very last minute. So it bought us a little time, and it gives the appearance that we've made a concession as we head towards this July 21st date. So I think there's a mini win there.
Trump forced Canada to drop its digital tax, and he got his win. But that moment triggered something bigger. While Trump celebrated, Carney shifted strategy away from U.S. dependence toward LNG exports and new global markets. At the same time, Canadians responded in their own way, with record levels of national pride and a quiet boycott of America. This isn't just a trade story anymore, it's a turning point. Trump got what he wanted. Just days after cutting off trade talks, he watched Canada fold. The digital tax, worth over 7 billion Canadian dollars, was gone, canceled just hours before it took effect. No tariffs. Number 301 probe. Just a clean public retreat. It looked like a total win, but not to everyone. Economist Julian Karagassian, a former special advisor to Canada's finance ministry, saw it differently. He called it a smart tactical play, not surrender, but timing. By holding the tax until the last possible moment, then pulling it, Carney created the appearance of concession without giving up broader leverage. The loss was real. Canada gave up billions in projected revenue at a time of historic budget pressures, from defense spending to healthcare transfers. But the move also preserved space to negotiate, avoid escalation, and keep Canada at the table. Trump claimed victory. But Carney, Karagassian argued, had already pivoted to something much bigger.
I think we need to reduce our trade dependence on the United States. We are a natural resource superpower.
While Trump grabbed headlines, Carney played a longer game. Behind the scenes, his government launched a subtle economic reset, one that looks far beyond the U.S. market. Karagassian warns that Canada's current economic model, overly reliant on American demand, is under attack. The response? Diversify exports, pivot toward Asia, Europe, and the global South, and build an economy for the 21st century, with infrastructure to match. At the heart of this strategy is something tangible: liquefied natural gas, LNG.
Canada's first liquefied natural gas, or LNG, export facility is finally up and running. Canada could go from exporting 0 tons of LNG to more than 50 million tons per year.
On July 1st, Canada's first LNG export facility at Kitimat shipped its inaugural load to Asia, a historic milestone. It's part of a broader shift. 7 LNG projects are now in various stages of development, many backed by Indigenous communities. If completed, they could catapult Canada from 0 to over 50 million tons of LNG exports annually. The Sulisims LNG project, led by the Nisga'a Nation in British Columbia, is especially ambitious, with an estimated $20 billion USD price tag. The goal? Deliver gas to global markets by 2029. Canada is late to the LNG game, trailing far behind the US, which now leads the world in exports. But Carney may be betting that LNG, not tech taxes, is Canada's true bargaining chip. Politico and the Financial Times both point to LNG as a possible strategic lever in ongoing trade talks. And this time, it's tied to real-world flows, not just tax codes.
I don't remember anyone prescribing that all we needed was a loudmouth bully threatening our economy and sovereignty to reignite pride in flag and country.
I have canceled my usual visit to the U.S.
Trump's tactics may have pushed more than just politicians. They've pushed the people. According to a new Ipsos poll released June 30th, nearly half of Canadians say they feel more proud to be Canadian, a 33% jump over last year. Meanwhile, 77% say they view the U.S. more negatively due to Trump's recent threats. And nearly 3/4 say they'll avoid traveling to the U.S. altogether. Even more striking, 60% of Canadians say they trust Carney to manage Trump, a rare show of confidence in the middle of a trade dispute. On Canada Day, that sentiment echoed across the country. Carney didn't gloat or fight. He simply said, "We want the right deal, but nothing is guaranteed." So yes, Trump got his win. The tax is gone, the talks are back on. But Canada is shifting, in policy, in strategy, and in spirit. LNG may become the new language of leverage. And Carney, quiet but deliberate, is positioning his country for something more than just a deal. Trump may have won the first round, but the real match has just begun.